Beijing senior Chinese officials made the surprising announcement on Tuesday that the authorities had released most detainees held in the government's mass internment program for ethnic minority Muslims in China's far west, but provided no firm numbers or specific details to support their assertion. Auchan Tunias, vice chairman of the government of the region of Xinjiang, said 90% of people held in what the government calls vocational training centers had been returned to society. It was a contention that would be nearly impossible to independently verify in the tightly controlled region and flew in the face of accounts of disappearances and detentions that have been compiled by relatives abroad and human rights groups. Detainees who have been released from the camps say they were subjected to a high-pressure indoctrination program with the goal of removing any devotion to Islam and encouraging loyalty to China and its ruling Communist Party. The Chinese government's public relations effort, made in a news briefing with regional officials, was the clearest signal that officials are trying to defuse international criticism over the internment in Xinjiang of as many as 1 million Uyghurs and other ethnic minority Muslims. Transcript. Presently, the majority of people who have undergone education and training have returned to society and returned to their families, Mr. Tunias said, using the government's official description of the camps as education and training centers. Most have already successfully achieved employment, he said. Sharat Zakir, the chairman of the Xinjiang government, also said that as many as 90% of inmates at the camps had returned to society. The official saw ambiguous wording left room for uncertainty as to how much freedom can be exercised by inmates who have been released. Though they did not detail the circumstances under which detainees were being returned to society, it is highly likely that many people supposedly released are in fact still under heavy restrictions or being forced to work at factories run under tight security. Tahir Iman, a Uyghur activist based in Washington, expressed skepticism at the Chinese official suggestion that most detainees had been freed. Uyghurs abroad continue to be unable to reach their relatives in the region. No phone calls, no internet communications, he said. We are not sure who they released. Mr. Iman urged the authorities to remove restrictions on the region and allow independent parties to verify the situation. If the Chinese government is honest and confident in what it is saying to the media, it should allow people to communicate freely and go out of the country freely and allow independent media to visit and investigate freely, he said. He added that there were still many accounts of people disappearing across the region, including religious leaders, intellectuals, business people, and farmers. We have credible evidence and facts that show that only women, children, and old people are left behind, he said. Many young men and fathers are detained. The Chinese officials declined to say how many people were held in the camps or how many were released, arguing that the fluid conditions made it difficult to estimate. They said the program of enforced indoctrination, which the government has said is aimed at curbing religious extremism, had been effective. Children are interrogated. Neighbors become informants. Mosques are monitored. Cameras are everywhere. These people have become a positive factor in society, Mr. Zakir said. Xinjiang is home to over 11 million Uyghurs, a largely Muslim minority, and their treatment has become a global human rights controversy under President Xi Jinping. Western governments, United Nations human rights experts, and advocates of Uyghur self-determination have condemned the increasingly harsh restrictions on many Uyghurs, especially their detention by the hundreds of thousands in re-education camps across Xinjiang. Mr. Zakir is Xinjiang's most senior Uyghur official, and has repeatedly served as the public face defending Chinese government policies in the region, including the re-education camps, which rapidly expanded starting in 2017. By contrast, Chen Quanguo, the more powerful Communist Party secretary of the region, has stayed in the background. In October, party officials began to publicly acknowledge and defend the camps, many of which are large, prison-like facilities behind walls. In March, Mr. Zakir likened them to boarding schools where inmates who include some of the most prominent Uyghur intellectuals also learn Chinese and useful job skills. The Chinese government says that the camps and other sweeping security measures have extinguished bloody anti-government attacks by Uyghurs. But critics say that the mass detentions of Uyghurs and other Muslim minority groups are sowing bitterness that could be even more dangerous. Earlier this month, a group of 22 countries, including Australia, Britain, Canada, France, and Germany, issued a statement urging China to halt the mass detention of Uyghurs and other Muslims. China struck back with a letter signed by 37 ambassadors from countries in Asia, Africa, the Middle East and Latin America who praised its human rights record, including the de-radicalization policies applied in Xinjiang.